Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunvari Paschatya Deshatayani. Today we're continuing with the prayers for the demigods to Devaki, because the Lord is within her womb. Can read.
Dhyanavasthita tadgatena manasa pashyanti yam yogiyaha. Srimad Bhagavatam 12:13-1. The yogi is fully absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for he has no other business than to think of the Lord always within the heart. It is also said, Samashritaye padapang pallavam mahat padam punyayasho murare avambude vatsa padam param padam yat vipadam natesham. For one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation, and is famous as Murari, the enemy of demon Mura, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in the calf's hoof print. His goal is Parampadam or Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, nor the place where there is danger at every step. 10:14:58. This is 10-30 purport.
So this is Lord Brahma. He's offering a prayer very similar to the prayer that the demigods have just offered, that the Lord's lotus feet are like a boat, and this boat, in order to cross the ocean of material nescience, just by approaching the boat, that entire ocean becomes the size of the imprint of a calf's hoof. Now how can we understand that actually? There's a lila in Dwarka. Arjuna happened to be visiting Krishna one time, and a Brahmin came. 8 of his babies had died. And the Brahmin was cursing Ugrasen, Krishna, Shankarshan, Pradumna, Aniruddha, because as Kshatriyas they should have protected his sons, but they didn't. When Arjun heard this, he said, I'm none of these people, but I'm Arjun, the holder of the Gandiva, and I will protect your son next time, and if not, I'll enter into fire. And he prayed to Lord Mahavir, Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva had given him weapons, and he was unsuccessful, so he was preparing to enter into fire. So Arjun, being Krishna's friend, if Arjun were to enter fire, it wouldn't look good for Krishna, so Krishna said, come, I'll show you, I know where the suns are. So they went all the way across the entire cosmic manifestation, all the seven islands with the 7 oceans, with their respective mountains, then Lokalok, then the vast darkness. Then after the vast darkness, they entered into the Brahmajyoti. It was so bright, Arjun had to close his eyes. And finally they reached a beautiful ocean. And within that ocean was a magnificent palace, and within that palace was Anantashesh, and lying on the Anantashesh was Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu, he had the 9 sons. And he said, I took the 9 sons just because I wanted to have your darshan. You are Narayan, and you've extended from me, and now you go back and you finish your service, and then your service of Paritunaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chatuskritam, and then you come back to me. So Arjun, he had to go through this vast whole journey with Krishna, because in the very beginning he forgot to surrender to Krishna. Had he just surrendered to Krishna, with the difference between when we forget to surrender to Krishna, then we have so much trouble within this material world. And if we're always taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, then all these perplexities, all of these troubles we experience, they become as significant as the imprint.
This process is recommended here by authorities like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Swayambhur Narada Shambhu, Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.20. And therefore, we must take to this process in order to transcend science. This is very easy, but we must follow in the footsteps of great personalities. And then success will be possible. In regard to the word Mahat Krutena, it is also significant that the process shown by great devotees is not only for them, but also for others. If things are made easy, this affords facility for the persons who has made them easy, and also for others who follow the same principles. The process recommended in this verse for crossing the ocean of nescience is ISKCON Madhya 17.186. This is 10 to 30 purport.
Srila Prabhupada mentions two slokas in this particular section of the purport. And one is spoken by Yamaraj, where Yamaraj describes to the Yamadutas that one must take shelter of the 12 Mahajans who understand what Bhagavad Dharma is and love for the Supreme Lord. And the other is spoken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Mahajano Yena Katasva Panta. So we'll look now at these two verses so we can understand how they're related to the prayers being offered by the demigods. It doesn't matter.
Lord Brahma, Bhagavan Narada, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, Lord Kapila, the son of Devahuti, Swayambhava Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, and I myself know the real religious principle. My dear servants, this transcendental religious principle, which is known as Bhagavata Dharma, or surrender unto the Supreme Lord and love for Him, is uncontaminated by material modes of nature. It is very confidential and difficult for ordinary human beings to understand. But if by chance, fortunately understands it, he is immediately liberated, and thus he returns home back to Godhead. Returns home back to Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.20. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, as Shastras confirm, one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajanas advocate. CC Madhya 17.186.
So now we know who the Mahajans are, and fortunately in our Sampradaya, we have two of the Mahajans listed here, which is Lord Brahma and Bhagavan Narada. All of these Mahajans, if we take shelter of their instructions, then we can understand what this Bhagavad Dharma, or surrender under the Supreme Lord and love for Him, actually is. So that's why Yamaraj was explaining to the Yamadutas that because Ajamil had chanted the name of Narayan and remembered Narayan, therefore he was protected by the Supreme Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he quoted this verse, actually it was spoken by Yudhisthira Maharaj, who is Dharma personified in the Mahabharata. Because the Vedas are so expansive in its knowledge that unless we take shelter of a Mahajan, we can't be sure which path to take to attain perfection in human life. So therefore, just as when Parikshit Maharaj was sitting at the bank of the Ganga, he also was inquiring from all the sages there. And none of them could give the exact perfection of how he should prepare for the moment of death until Sukadev Goswami came, and then he was able to hear about the nectarian pastimes of Krishna until that moment of death.
For the conditioned soul busy in sense gratification, a Mahajana is recognized according to the proportion of sense gratification he offers. For instance, a businessman may consider a certain banker to be a Mahajan. Karmis desiring material enjoyment may consider philosophers like Jaimini to be Mahajanas. Karma Mimamsa philosophy, no liberation. There are many yogis who want to control the senses, and for them Patanjali Rishi is a Mahajan. His Yoga Sutras. For the Jnanis, the 8 philosophers are Mahajans. For the demons, Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana's son Meghanad, Jarasandha and others are accepted as Mahajans. For materialistic anthropologists speculating on the evolution of body, a person like Darwin is Mahajan. This is C.C. Madhya 17185 purport.
Yes, so this is, Srila Prabhupada explains that depending upon the mentality of the individual, he'll see different types of Mahajans. And then Lord Chaitanya, in the next sloka, 186, he explains what a true Mahajan is. And we know who those Mahajans are from Yamaraj himself, one of the Mahajans.
Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane science. Only persons deprived of intelligence by the spell of deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21-14.
So, I've inserted this sloka. It was spoken by Kardama Muni. He underwent austerities for 10,000 years, and then Vishnu appeared to him to grant a benediction. This is one of the prayers that he offered, and he says exactly the same thing, that your lotus feet are a true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane nations. So this is the way all the great souls see the lotus feet of the Lord, that by taking shelter of Sri Krishna, then they can cross this massive ocean of material suffering and illusion.
O self-illuminated one, the great saintly persons who have crossed over the ocean of nescience with the help of the transcendental boat of your lotus feet have not taken away that boat. It is still lying on this side. Krishna Book Chapter 2. O Lord, who resemble the shining sun, you are always ready to fulfill the desire of your devotee, and therefore you are known as Desire Tree, Vancha Kalpataru. When acharyas completely take shelter under your lotus feet in order to cross the fierce ocean of nescience, they leave behind on earth the method by which they cross. And because you are very merciful to your other devotees, you accept this method to help them. Srimad Bhagavatam 10-31.
So now we've gone on to the next prayer. That's verse number 31. And the demigods are revealing that when the great Mahajans cross the ocean of material suffering by taking shelter of your lotus feet in this boat, the boat is the lotus feet of the Lord, it's not that they take the boat with them. The boat is still on this side of the ocean for us to enter into. So simply by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, we also cross this material ocean just as the Mahajans have done. So this is a transcendental boat. That means just by approaching it, we attain the destination that we're seeking.
The demigods are using a nice simile. If one takes a boat to cross over a river, the boat also goes with one to the other side of the river. And so when one reaches the destination, how can the same boat be available to those who are still on the other side? To answer this difficulty, the demigods say in prayer that the boat is not taken away. The devotees still remaining on the other side are able to pass over the ocean of material nature because the pure devotees do not take the boat with them when they cross over. When one simply approaches the boat, the whole ocean of material nescience is reduced to size of water in the calf's hoof print. Therefore, the devotees do not need to take a boat to the other side. They simply cross the ocean immediately. Because the great saintly persons are compassionate toward all conditioned souls, the boat is still lying at the lotus feet of the Lord. One can meditate upon his feet at any time, and by doing so, one can cross over the great ocean of material existence. Krishna Book, Chapter 2.
So this is the way Srila Prabhupada explains to us this prayer. And we have the perfect example of Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Because in the two different forms of devotional service, one by Kirtan and the other by Shravan, they both took shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and they both attained perfection in devotional service. And ourselves, just by hearing the conversation of these two great devotees, we also can attain that perfection if our meditation becomes undeviated. So therefore we should listen very carefully. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, we should always be serving the Supreme Lord, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the devotees who are also considered to be Bhagavats.
This statement reveals how the merciful Acharyas and the merciful Supreme Personality of Godhead together help the serious devotee who wants to return home back to Godhead. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his teachings to Rupa Goswami said, this is in CC, Madhya 19:151. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavana Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Pae Bhakti Lata Bija. One can achieve the seed of Bhakti Lata, devotional service, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. The duty of the Guru is to find the means according to the time, circumstances and the candidate by which one can be induced to render devotional service, which Krishna accepts from a candidate who wants to be successful in going back home, back to Godhead. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 10-31 purport.
So here Srila Prabhupada is explaining the duty of the Acharya. The Acharya, he has to take the teachings and incorporate them so that his followers are busy 24 hours a day in serving the Lord. So he devises different activities for his disciples and his followers. That's exactly what Srila Prabhupada did. When Srila Prabhupada first went to America, he requested the devotees to chant 64 rounds every day because that's what his Guru Maharaj insisted upon for his disciples. His fledgling devotees were unable to do that. So he said, all right, 32 rounds a day. They couldn't do that either. So then Prabhupada, very mercifully, he conceded to minimum 16 rounds a day, and you must follow the 4 regulative principles. And then gradually he instituted more different types of service and more different types of regulations for the devotees to follow. And eventually he translated Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu so we could understand all the 64 different types of service that we can render and all of the offenses that we have to avoid, the pravriti, the nivriti of devotional service. So this is the duty of the Acharya. He doesn't create his own process. Simply as he learned it from his spiritual master, he passes it on according to time and circumstance and the qualification of the candidates depending upon what they can follow. And that's what Prabhupada did. He gave about 80 books for his disciples and everyone to read, and he gave so much devotional service by establishing temples all over the world. And within those temples, all the 9 processes of devotional service can be successfully executed.
After wandering throughout the universe, a fortunate person within this material world seeks shelter of such a guru or acharya who trains the devotee in the suitable ways to render service according to the circumstances, so that Supreme Personality of Godhead will accept the service. This makes it easier for the candidate to reach the ultimate destination. The acharya's duty, therefore, is to find the means by which devotees may render service according to references from Shastra. Rupa Goswami, for example, in order to help subsequent devotees, published such devotional books as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Thus it is the duty of the acharya to publish books that will help future candidates take up the method of service and become eligible to return home back to Godhead by the mercy of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam 10-31 purport.
So in our Sampradaya, we're most fortunate to have the great incarnation of Bhakti, Narada Muni. Narada Muni, he was so blessed that he could go and see Krishna anytime he wanted. He would sometimes come to Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarka, just to see the Leela of the Lord. Particularly he liked Dwarka. And he not only viewed and took part in the pastimes of the Lord, but he was the most prolific of all preachers. He goes to all the planetary systems trying to pick up the fallen living entities and take them back to Krishna's lotus feet. And throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll read about so many of his illustrious disciples, such as Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, and many others. So, Narada Muni not only traveled and preached, he also produced literature. One of them, Srila Prabhupada started to translate for us, called the Narada Bhakti Sutra, and the other is the Pancharatriki Vidhi, that's the system that we follow when we do the Archana Seva. So Narada Muni coming in our line, we always follow his instructions, and to this day, although millions and millions of years ago these books were written, we're still following all the instructions that he's given in the books that he wrote.
In our Krishna consciousness movement, the same path is being prescribed and followed. Thus the devotees have been advised to refrain from 4 sinful activities: illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling, and to chant 16 rounds a day. These are bona fide instructions, because in the Western countries constant chanting is not possible. One should not artificially imitate Haridas Thakur, but should follow this method. Krishna will accept a devotee who strictly follows regulative principles and the method prescribed in the various books and literatures published by the authorities. It's 10-31 purport.
So these 4 regulative principles, they're not actually mentioned in particular in the Bhagavad-Gita when Prabhupada wrote his purports to the Bhagavad-Gita, but they are mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, because when Kali tried to enter the kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj gave him only 4 places where he could stay, and that's where these 4 principles were not being followed. But because Parikshit Maharaj was an exemplary king, everyone was following the 4 regulative principles. So Kali still had nowhere where he could reside. So ultimately, Parikshit Maharaj told him wherever gold is being stored, he could stay there. Because whenever people out of greed, they try to accumulate gold too much, then automatically these 4 sinful activities will be a result.
The Acharya gives the suitable method for crossing the ocean by the grace of the Lord. This method is called Acharya Sampradaya. It is therefore said, Sampradaya Vihinaye Mantrate Nishphala Mataha. This is from Padma Purana. The Acharya Sampradaya is strictly bona fide. Therefore, one must accept the Acharya Sampradaya. Otherwise, one's endeavor will be futile. Srila Narottam Das Thakur therefore sings, Tandera charana sevi bhakta sanivasa janame janame hai abhilasha. One must worship the lotus feet of the Acharya and live within the society of devotees. Then one's endeavor to cross over nescience will surely be successful. This 10 to 31 purport.
So, in the 4th canto, the 30th chapter, there's the story of the Prachetas, who were sons of Prachini Barisat. Prachini Barisat wanted his sons to execute tapasya so that they could get the mercy of the Lord, so they could have good progeny. So for 10,000 years, the Prachetas performed tapasya. And Lord Shiva, he blessed them with a mantra, the song of Lord Shiva, to chant, to please the Lord. It was all about devotional service to Vishnu. And Vishnu ultimately was pleased, and he came to bless the Prachetas. Now the Prachetas were alone offering, performing tapasya. But Vishnu told them that you 10 brothers, you yourselves, you're your own association because you all have very good temperament and very good behavior. And I'm very pleased with your devotional service. So because the Lord understood why they were performing tapasya, he gave them a particular benediction that they would marry a woman, they would all marry one woman, and she would give them good progeny because she was of that same devotional temperament as them. So the devotees, in their performance of devotional service, if it's pure, they only want to please the Supreme Lord. But the Supreme Lord sometimes understands from within the heart what the actual desire is of the devotee. Just as Kardama Muni, he wanted to execute the order of his father. The Prachetas wanted to execute the order of their father. But then the Lord blesses the devotees that after you've executed that order, I assure you that you will attain liberation and you will go back to the spiritual world. So both, by performing tapasya, taking shelter of the lotus feet, and getting the Lord's blessings, in both cases, both the Prachetas and Kardama Muni, they were able to cross this ocean of material emotions and return to the spiritual world.
Meditation means concentration upon lotus feet of the Lord. Lotus feet indicate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are impersonalists do not recognize the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore their object of meditation is something impersonal. The demigods express their mature verdict that persons who are interested in meditating on something void or impersonal cannot cross over the ocean of nescience. Such persons are simply imagining that they have become liberated. O lotus-eyed Lord, their intelligence is contaminated because they fail to meditate upon the lotus feet of your Lordship. Krsna book, chapter 2.
So in the spiritual world, everything is self-illuminated. The Supreme Lord is self-illuminated, the planets are self-illuminated, and the residents are also self-illuminated. So when Arjuna and Krishna were crossing all of the 7 islands, and they entered the big darkness, and then they entered within the Brahman, the Brahmajyoti, Arjuna couldn't bear the effulgence. That effulgence was coming from the spiritual realm where Krishna lives. And the devotees, they're able to cross and enter within those devotional realms, those spiritual realms, because they've taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, if we're talking about feet, lotus feet, well, feet means there's a body. That means there's a person. But the impersonalists don't understand that. They think that the body of the Supreme Lord is a material body just like our body. And therefore, they're unable to take shelter within the spiritual planets where the Supreme Lord lives because they don't understand that there's activity and there's form and there's rasa going on within those spiritual realms. So they're blinded by that effulgence of the Brahma Jyoti, and they can't get past that because they haven't taken shelter of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. It doesn't matter which form. Just as we have the example of Hanumanji, he was the staunchest, the greatest devotee of Sri Ram. So he entered into Ram's planet. That's where he wanted to go. So any form of the Lord that we have attachment for, we can attain their spiritual planet. But particularly because we're followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we want to enter into the Gaura Leela and the Krishna Leela in Svetadvip and Goloka Vrindavan.
Someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? In answer to this question, Lord Brahma and other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. Srimad Bhagavatam 10-32.
Now, in order to attain the position of Indra, you have to perform a lot of austerities, a lot of tapasya, and a lot of pious activities. And then when finally one is elevated to that post, it's just a temporary post, just like any post, department head. When a living entity attains that post, he doesn't want to give it up. Now we had the experience in Krishna Leela that Indra, twice in Krishna Leela we saw this. Once was when the Indra Puja was stopped, so he decided to inundate Braj, and he forgot that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. So Krishna intentionally made that whole Leela just to remind Indra that he's only a servant of the Lord. And Indra, in his foolishness, he finally realized that Krishna is the Supreme Lord and came and surrendered to him. He was afraid because he knew he had. And then a second time, when Krishna and Satyabhama went to kill Narakasura, and they brought back the umbrella and the earrings of Aditi, that was Indra's mother. They went to heaven and returned these two things. So Indra should have been very grateful. Instead, when Krishna took a parijata tree, Indra attacked Krishna because he was prodded by his wife, Sachi, that how can a mortal take the parijata tree from heaven? So Indra again forgot his position and again had to be reminded by the Supreme Lord that he's only a servant of the Lord. So although he was a devotee, it's proved that even the devotees, if they're puffed up by some position, the pratishta, they can easily forget that they're only servants of the Lord, and therefore we always have to remember, we're nothing but little blades of grass. And if we can do any service for Krishna, then we're always safe at his lotus feet.
As a result of this neglectful activity, the impersonalists fall down again into the material way of conditioned life. Although they may temporarily rise up to the point of impersonal realization. Impersonalists after undergoing severe austerities and penances, merge themselves into the Brahman effulgence or impersonal Brahman existence. But their minds are not free from material contamination. They have simply tried to negate the material ways of thinking. That does not mean that they have become liberated. Thus they fall down. In the Bhagavad-Gita, it is stated that the impersonalist has to undergo great tribulation in realizing the ultimate goal. At the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also stated that without devotional service to Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve liberation from the bondage of fruitive activities. Krishna book, chapter 2.
So there's the yoga system, observing all the austerities and tapasya that the impersonalists also follow. But Markandeya Rishi, he was actually a pure devotee of the Lord. And Indra, see the demigods, when they offer benedictions, for instance, when they offered a benediction to Muchakunda, they told him from the very start that we'll give you any benediction you want except for liberation. Because we can't give liberation, only the Supreme Lord can give that. So what does this liberation mean? It means freedom from the cycle of birth and death. So even the demigods and the sages, the impersonalists, they're not free from that cycle yet. Because unless one takes shelter in the spiritual world, on a spiritual planet, serving the Supreme Lord, one is forced to come down again into material activities. It's just like flying in an airplane. You can fly for just so long, but then you have to come down and land somewhere. So the impersonalists, they're merged within this Brahma Jyoti, but eventually, because their intelligence is impure, they become contaminated again with material desires and come down, because each living entity has to have activities. So Markandeya Rishi, he was meditating for such a long time, 6 or 7 lifetimes of Manu, and he has seen the waters of annihilation. Such a long time he was meditating on the Lord, and Indra became afraid that Markandeya Rishi might become so powerful that he'll take his position. So Indra sent Cupid and Apsaras and Gandharvas to break the meditation of Markandeya Rishi. And Markandeya Rishi, because he was so fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord, actually Indra and all of his associates began to burn from the fire of his tapasya, and they all fled the place. And the Supreme Lord was so satisfied with Markandeya Rishi's devotion that they appeared to him, the Supreme Lord in the form of Narayan appeared to him and blessed him with pure devotional service. So the yoga system, either you can do impersonal or personal, but it's only the personalists who attain the supreme perfection of Krishna's lotus feet. The impersonalists, they're forced to come back down again because of their impure intelligence.
Aside from devotees, there are many others, non-devotees, known as karmis, dhyanis and yogis, philanthropists, altruists, politicians, impersonalists and voidists. There are many varieties of non-devotees who have their respective ways of liberation, but simply because they do not know the shelter of Lord's lotus feet, although they falsely think that they have been liberated and elevated to the highest position, they fall down, as clearly stated by Lord himself in Bhagavad-Gita 9.3, Ashradadhana Purusha Dharmasya Pantapa Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. It does not matter whether one is a karmi, jnani, yogi, philanthropist, politician or whatever. If one has no love for the lotus feet of the Lord, one falls down. That is the verdict given by Lord Brahma in this verse. 10 to 32 purport.
the example of Muchukunda and Kaliyavana. Kaliyavana, he had come to attack Krishna and the Yadavas, the Andakas, and the Vrishnis with crores of mlechas and Yavanas. And Krishna alone, four-armed Vishnu as Vasudeva, he began to run, and Kaliyavana began to chase him. But of course, because he wasn't a devotee, he wasn't able to catch the Lord. So when Krishna tricked Kaliyavana, he entered into a cave and he stood at the head of Muchukunda very silently. And Kaliyavana entered, and he thought that Muchukunda lying there was Vasudeva. So with all of his might, he kicked Muchukunda, and Muchukunda woke up. And because of the benediction he received from the demigods, he was able to burn Kaliyavana just by looking at him. He was burnt to ashes. And then Muchukunda, he saw the Supreme Lord. And he, being a devotee, he began to offer beautiful prayers to the Lord and took shelter at his lotus feet. So that's the difference between a non-devotee, and there are so many different types of non-devotees. Prabhupada's given a long list here. The karmis, the gyanis, the yogis, all non-devotees who don't acknowledge the Supreme Lord. So Kaliyavana was burnt to ashes. He wasn't even killed by the Supreme Lord. And Muchukunda, he attained liberation and personal liberation. He was able to return to the spiritual world at the end of this lifetime because he understood that this is a Supreme Lord standing before him. So any type of non-devotee who doesn't acknowledge the existence of the Lord or recognize the Lord according to the Shastra is doomed to failure, because unless we develop love for the Lord, we can't attain the perfection of life.
The statement of Lord Krishna is there in Bhagavad-Gita, and in Srimad Bhagavatam the statement of great sage Narada is there, and here also the demigods confirm it. Persons who have not taken to devotional service are understood to have come short of the ultimate purpose of knowledge and are not favored by your grace. The impersonalists simply think that they are liberated, but actually they have no feeling for the personality of Godhead. They think that when Krishna comes into material world, he accepts a material body. They therefore overlook the transcendental body of Krishna. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita. Avajananti mam mudha. In spite of conquering material lust and rising up to the point of liberation, the impulsive fall down. Krishna book chapter 2.
So we know from the Krishna book later and from Srimad Bhagavatam that previously Kaliya lived in the, what's the name of that island? I forget now. Ramanak, yes, Ramanak, which is present-day Fiji. And he had to flee there because he offended Garuda, and he took shelter because his older brother is Sheshanag, and Sheshanag knew that because the snakes and the nagas and the birds, such as Garuda, they're always fighting with each other. So Sheshanag, his older brother, Ananta, told Kaliya, go stay in the Jamuna river because Garuda can't go there. So Kaliya, in the previous life to that, he was sage who had an ashram. And another sage came there to stay at his ashram. And that first sage sent him away. He said, you can't stay in my ashram. So that sage cursed him that you're as envious as a snake. So that's why that sage had to take birth as Kaliya. So in this birth as Kaliya, taking a snake form, he was very envious, angry, full of poison. And when he came to live in the Jamuna River, when Krishna came there, he certainly didn't recognize Krishna as the Supreme Lord. He simply considered that this little boy is disturbing my abode. So he attacked Krishna. And finally, Krishna, because he doesn't have a material body, Krishna was able to completely subdue Kaliya, and then his wives, who were great devotees, prayed to Krishna that he please take mercy on this sinful, evil, envious, and angry snake who happens to be their husband. Because without the husband, they'll be widowed then, they'll have no one to protect them. So please save his life. So then Krishna, by their prayers, he allowed Kaliya to live, and then Kaliya himself began to offer prayers. And therefore, he became a devotee as well. And he wanted to do some service for Krishna. So sometimes you'll see in the different artwork of Krishna that just as Garuda, he is the carrier of Krishna. So Kaliya, he wanted to be the carrier of Krishna also. And sometimes Krishna stands on Kaliya's head, and he also moves like that, as if Kaliya is his carrier. So even a sinful, envious snake like Kaliya, when he's battered by the lotus feet of Krishna, when he takes shelter of those lotus feet, he also can become a devotee and do service for Krishna.
If they are engaged just in knowing things for the sake of knowledge and do not take to devotional service of the Lord, they cannot achieve the desired result. Their achievement is the trouble they take, and that is all. It is clearly stated in Bhagavad-Gita that to realize Brahman identification is not all. Brahman identification may help one become joyful without material attachment or detachment and to achieve the platform of equanimity. But after this stage, one has to take to devotional service. When one takes to devotional service after being elevated to the platform of Brahman realization, he is then admitted into the spiritual kingdom for permanent residence in association with Supreme Personality of God. That is the result of devotional service. Krishna Book, Chapter 2.
So how does one elevate from this level of equanimity to the level of devotional service? That was given at the very beginning. Brahmanda Brahmate Ona Bhagavan. Only by the mercy of the devotee can one learn about devotional service. That means one must take the association of devotees, take their shelter and learn from them. So there was one great king. He was the king of Videha. His name was Maharaj Nimi. And by chance, the 9 sons of Vrishabdev, who were the Navayogendras, they came to his kingdom one day. And he began to inquire from them about devotional service and about all the qualities and lila of the Supreme Lord. And one by one, the 9 sages, they gave realization to Maharaj Nimi, and everyone in his kingdom also benefited. So, similarly in our own life, we can only get just so far in spiritual realization, and then we must take the association of the advanced devotees and learn from them how to advance further in devotional service. We can do that by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, by taking shelter of the devotees who are present here and learning from them and serving them and chanting the holy name. All of these are bona fide methods for advancing in devotional service so that we can finally get the association of the Supreme Lord.
There are persons who advocate accepting any process and who say that whatever process one accepts will lead to the same goal. But that is refuted in this verse, where such persons are referred to as Vimuktamanina, signifying that although they think they have attained the highest perfection, in fact they have not. In the present day, big politicians all over the world think that by scheming they can occupy the highest political post, that of president or prime minister, But we actually see that even in this life, such big prime ministers, presidents and other politicians, because of being non-devotees, fall down. Patanti adaha, 10 to 32 purport.
So we know the example of Duryodhan by his scheming. Of course, the real emperor should have been Bhishma Dev. But Bhishma Dev, he took a vow not to sit in the Singhasan, the Raja Singhasan, because his father wanted to marry Satyavati. So then, Bhishma Dev, because of political alliances, he was compelled to fight on the side of Duryodhana, even though he knew that Duryodhana was adharmic, because Duryodhana did everything possible to keep his high post as he wasn't actually emperor, he was the king, because he couldn't perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. He wasn't powerful enough. But Bhishma Dev had to fight on his side, and he was the general of his army, of Duryodhana's army. So Duryodhana was completely devastated. He was everything was finished in that great battle, because Dharma always is superior to adharma. So Duryodhana died a very his death was not glorious at all. And Bhishma Dev, because he was dharmic, he wouldn't fight with Shikandi, and therefore Arjuna was able to pierce him with so many arrows. But even then he didn't die. He waited for the auspicious time, and he was praying to see the Supreme Lord at the moment of death. So Krishna, understanding that wish, Krishna, Yudhisthira and all the Pandavas came to see him as he prepared for death. And at that time, he spoke all the tenets of Dharma to Yudhisthira to convince him that actually what he did was the highest Dharma, because he followed what Krishna wanted him to do. So Bhishma, being a devotee, he took full shelter of Krishna, although he wasn't able to perform all the activities that he wanted to do because of political alliances by helping the Pandavas. He did help them secretly, and Duryodhana would criticize him for that. But ultimately, he also had to meet his death because he didn't object when Draupadi was being disrobed in the assembly, and other misdemeanors that had occurred during his alliance with Duryodhana. So the devotees, they understand that what is really the highest post? The highest post is to be right under the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, because any other higher post will definitely be slashed and taken away from us at the time of death.
To become president or prime minister is not easy. One must work very hard, Aruya Krsna, to achieve the post. And even though one may reach his goal, at any moment one may be kicked down by material nature. In human society, there have been many instances in which great exalted politicians have fallen from government and become lost in historical oblivion. The cause of this is Avishuddha Buddhayaha, Srimad Bhagavatam 10 to 32. Their intelligence is impure. This is from the purport.
So, Kunti Devi, she was the wife of Pandu, who was actually the emperor. Pandu died, and Kunti Devi, she was the queen. But she had to go through so many tribulations that were given to her by her own family members. She had to live in the forest incognito, and then she had to live under the protection of the very people who were trying to kill her. Finally, when Krishna killed all of those sinful people, she came and offered prayers to Krishna. And though she was the queen, she prayed to Krishna that I don't want anything. Because only the Akinchana Gochara, those who are completely finished with any type of material opulences, are the ones who can take shelter of your lotus feet. Not by high birth, not by wealth, not by education, not by beauty. None of these things will qualify one to take full shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. It's only by pure love and by rendering service to him that we can actually take shelter of his lotus feet.
The Shastra says, Nate vidu swartha gatim hi Vishnu. Bhagavad-Gita 7.5.31. One achieves the perfection of life by becoming a devotee of Vishnu. But people do not know this. Therefore, as stated in Bhagavad-Gita 12.5, Klesho dikatas tesham avyakta sakta chetasam. Persons who do not ultimately accept the personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and take to devotional service, but who instead are attached to impersonalism and voidism, must undergo great labor to achieve their goals. It's 10.14.4 Srimad Bhagavatam. Shreyas sutim bhakti mudasyate vibho klishyanti ye kevala bodha labdhe. To achieve understanding, such persons work very hard and undergo severe austerities, but their hard labor and austerities themselves are their only achievement, for they do not actually achieve the real goal of life. It's 10-32 purport.
So when Lord Brahma realized that little Krishna was actually the Supreme Lord engaging in his Braja Leela, he came and offered so many beautiful prayers. So this 10.14.4 we'll hear now.
Lord Brahma prays, My dear Lord, devotional service unto you is the best path of self-realization. If someone gives up that path and engages in cultivation of speculative knowledge, he will simply undergo a troublesome process and will not achieve his desired result. As a person who beats an empty husk of wheat cannot get grain, one who simply speculates cannot achieve self-realization. His only gain is trouble. This is 10.14.4.
And this is why we have to take shelter of an acharya, of a devotee, in the acharya sampradaya. Because the Vedas are so vast, we can speculate which of the different types of upasanas to follow, karma kanda, jnana kanda, upasana kanda. But ultimately, unless we take shelter of a pure devotee, we'll never understand the full perfection of life, which is simply to love Krishna and render service to him.
Dhruva Maharaj at first wanted to achieve the greatest material kingdom and greater material possessions than his father. But when he was actually favored by Lord, who appeared before him to give him the benediction he desired, Dhruva Maharaj refused it, saying, Swamin Kruta Rosmi Varam Nayache, CC Madhya 2242. Now I am fully satisfied. I do not want any material benediction. Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya 7.28. This is the perfection of life. Yam labdhva cha param labham manyate nadhikam tataha. Bhagavad-Gita 6.22. If one achieves the shelter of Lord's lotus feet, one is fully satisfied and does not need to ask for any material benediction. 10-32 purport.
So this example, Lord Chaitanya especially liked to hear the story of Dhruva Maharaj and the prayers that he offered. Because though he was a little child, he had a very strong desire. And as he was going to the forest looking for God, he was asking the animals, are you God? And anyone he saw, he asked, are you God? Because his mother told him that God lived in the forest. He didn't know what God looked like. So he was asking everyone, where is God and who is God? Are you God? So finally Narada Muni, he came and told him, you're just a little boy, go home now. Later when you grow up, we can do something about this. And even to Narada Muni, he said, unless you can help me find the person I'm looking for, which is Supreme Lord, because I have something to ask him, then please get out of the way. So then Narada Muni, he gave him the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, in order to attain the Supreme Lord's favor. And he was so determined to get what he wanted as a little child that he chanted that mantra faithfully. And within 6 months, he had given up everything. And the Supreme Lord appeared before him, and by that time, his intelligence, his mind, all of his desires were completely purified. And he was so happy meditating on the Supreme Lord that when his meditation broke and he opened his eyes and he saw the Supreme Lord in front of him, he offered this prayer that I don't want anything. All I want is the shelter of your lotus feet. And that's also the way our lives should be, that every day we go to Mangalarti, every day we see the Supreme Lord, and we simply pray, please Lord, today let me engage in your service at your lotus feet.
At night, no one can see a lotus, for lotuses blossom only during the daytime. Therefore the word Arvindaksha is significant. One who is not captivated by the lotus eyes or transcendental form of Supreme Lord is in darkness, exactly like one cannot see a lotus. One who has not come to the point of seeing the lotus eyes and transcendental form of Shamasundar is a failure. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hrideshu vilokayanti. Brahma Samhita 5.38. Those who are attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in love always see the Lord's lotus eyes and lotus feet, whereas others cannot see the Lord's beauty and are therefore classified as anadrata yushmadangraya, or neglectful of Lord's personal form. 10 to 32 purport.
So here we have the example of Uddhav. Uddhav was a disciple of Brihaspati. And actually, because Brihaspati was a Jnani, he was trained in Jnana. So he was also considered a Jnani. And Krishna understood that. So Krishna sent him to Braj to learn about bhakti. And when he came back, then he understood what the prem of the Brijvasis is. He wanted to stay. He stayed for 2 months. And when Krishna left the planet, Krishna told him to go to Badarik Ashram and there stay where Narayana are living and meditate on the Supreme Lord there. On the way he met Vidura. That's where this place is here in Vrindavan called Gyan Gudri, where they met and they had conversation. And he was simply remembering all the pastimes of the Lord. Particularly, he remembered the pastime of Putana. Because Putana, she was a witch. She was a demoness. And she had come to kill Krishna. But just because she offered the Lord her breast and her breast milk, the Lord accepted it and he placed her in the position as good as a mother. So Uddhav, in his love for the Lord, he couldn't give up thinking about Krishna and his pastimes for one moment. Simply absorbed in Krishna meditation, Krishna consciousness. So hopefully that's the way we can become, and we'll hear more of his prayers tomorrow. Hare Krishna.